You're watching Cox Connections only on Cox 11. Before 1940, African Americans were barred from flying for the U.S. military. Despite this, the Tuskegee Airmen overcame segregation and prejudice to become one of the most highly respected fighter groups of World War II. Their achievements, together with the men and women who supported them, paved the way for full integration of the U.S. military. We had the opportunity to visit with Sergeant Harry Quinton, one of the original Tuskegee Airmen, who shared his amazing story with us.
The most important thing to me is that I was a part of history and a part of a group that helped change the way the military thought about black people. There was a slogan that came, I guess, afterwards that we were fighting for the right to fight, because there was a lot of doubt that African Americans could even handle complicated machinery, that we were cowards, that our brains were smaller than Caucasian brains, therefore we couldn't think. And we had to disprove all that. I was an American, and this was my country. And I want them to remember us as being patriots, pioneers, and maybe an unusual group of people. And a lot of us felt that if we did, that things would be different when the war was over. I had an advantage being that I was a certified mechanic, and they sent me to the North American Aviation Plant in Inglewood, California, where they built the B-25. And we had an intensive course in the maintenance of that plane, because the 477th Bombardment Group they were being trained to fly the B-25 bomber. All of us knew that we were doing something that no other group of blacks had been doing before. I mean, you never knew of any blacks working on airplanes. I went from one segregated society into what you might call an all-black army because we were still segregated. The rules of segregation still applied. And when you thought that you were fighting, you had been called upon to fight for your country, that you wouldn't be treated in that manner. They told us that we could only go to the post exchange one day a week between certain hours. So I went up there that day, and to my surprise, they had German POWs who were just lounging around like they were on vacation, and they could go any day they wanted. And I said a few choice words to myself. They're treating the German POWs better than they're treating us. And 70-some years later, I lived long enough to go to the Congressional Gold Medal ceremony, invited to 2 presidential inaugurations. People come up and thank me for my service. I have people come up and say, my grandfather was flying the B-17s during World War II, and if it hadn't been for the Red Tails escorting us, talking about the Tuskegee Airmen, that we would have never gotten back home safe. And that gives you a lot of self-satisfaction that I was part of that group.
Joining me now is Mr. Ron Frink, president of the Tidewater chapter of the Tuskegee Airmen. Thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you, Gary.
You know, what amazing piece we just saw from Sergeant Quinton. We heard that, but Ron, who were the Tuskegee Airmen? You've been around, you've heard some of the stories, you've actually talked to Sergeant Quinton, but who were the Tuskegee Airmen?
Tuskegee Airmen were approximately 1,000 men who were sent to Tuskegee Institute, along with Hampton Institute and other universities in the country, to learn how to fly. because there was no place for them to learn. During those times, America was segregated.
And there was a belief, frankly, that black men couldn't fly these machines. Is that correct?
That's absolutely right. The War College published a paper saying that African American men, they were cowards, couldn't handle this complex machinery.
Well, we know the story. They did
we
more
know
than
the story.
fly. They were very successful. Very rarely lost a plane. Talk a little bit about locally the chapter. I guess there are a number of Tuskegee Airmen still living in this community. Talk a little bit about that.
Oh yes, Gary. Hampton Roads is home to 5 documented original Tuskegee Airmen: Harry Quinton, Grant Williams Sr., Ezra Hill, Wilbert Gore, and William White.
Yeah, it's just wonderful that these men, these heroes, are still among us today. And we'd be remiss if we did not talk about this. It took family support as well. Their spouses, I'm assuming, that are still with us and can tell some of the stories as well.
Oh yes, we have 2 spouses that live here in the area. Miss Amelia Thomas, she's an active member of our chapter. She's actually our chapter historian. And Miss Margaret Anderson.
You know, I think about the importance of what these men and women, the families, did. Why is it important for us to continue to keep this story alive, and so that, you know, future generations can know about the heroism of these young men and their families and the sacrifices that their families made?
I think it's important in that they get a chance to share their history, which is not in the American history books. And when they interact with students and they can share with them what they've gone through, then students will know you can achieve anything that you desire with some hard work, perseverance, and dedication and commitment.
Well, listen, I want to thank you for your leadership of the chapter and keeping this rich history alive, because it really is a lesson that I think our young people need to see over and over again, that despite the odds, you can do incredible things. Just as you said, if you have that determination and that
Yes.
persistence and that drive, you can do absolutely anything. So thank you again for your leadership, and thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you.
When we return, have things changed for the better for the African American man and woman in Hampton Roads in the last 50 years? We'll try to answer that question when we come back with more Cox Connections.